Hello everyone. Uh, we are going to look into some of the features that come along the framework utility, which is an open source project on GitHub. We have been using this for a while in some of our projects like OP, SIGWMS, e-commerce and all. Let us break it into pieces and see some of the utilities. The first one we are going to see is on assertion. Okay, the first assertion we are going to see is about the not null. So we are using an anonymous block to express these today on assertions, but it is the same thing with a procedure or a function that you have compiled. So we have a local variable L supplier ID and it is not assigned anything. We are trying to see if it passes our assertion, right? Like we are checking if L supplier ID is not null. We don't have anything assigned. So this typically happens when you have some input parameters coming in and you expect it to be not null, but they send you null. This is more like an user raised exception. Rather than say you got an input value that is and like that came in as null and you're trying to insert into a table where that particular column is of type not null. It'll raise a SQL exception. Instead, here we are trying to assert before even we try to do the SQL action. So it can have a meaningful user defined exception. So if you see, we have line number 4 displayed here, which says before assertion supplier ID, and since it's null, it's not printing anything. And then it went to the next line and it said supplier ID is required, which is exactly what we have provided. So this returns true or false. If it is false, it raises an exception. If it is true, it goes to the next line, 6, right? So the exception happened at line 5. Now let us assign a value to the same variable and run through the exact same steps. It is a success, right? Like before assertion and it's after assertion. So you have the supplier ID. So after assertion, supplier ID, right? So this is an example for a not null. Now let us get into some fancy example, right? Like say a phone number, right? A phone number is typically like you want to make sure all digits that are coming through are number. Sometimes they have separated with spaces or dash or dot or something. So we are going to use regular expression to validate it, but the amount of validations you want to do, you can always improve. In this section, there is only certain things I'm validating. I'm not covering all different sections, right? So this is a limited set of structure I'm looking for, right? So let's see what happens with the phone number. So in the phone number, I'm passing a phone number which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? That is typically a phone number, right? The first 3 are the area code, the next 3 are the exchange, and the last 4 are the numbers, right? This again, this is from the olden days. These are meaningless nowadays. But like you still kind of have an area code, but area code is also becoming like exchanges became obsolete long time back, but like area codes meant something. But with the way the people are moving now, area codes are also becoming obsolete these days. Anyway, let's try to assert if this is a valid phone number. In here, it says it is not a valid phone number. And I wonder why, right? Like we provided it 10 characters and it says it's not a valid number. If I look closer, I typoed O instead of 0 here. So it found the alpha character and it said no, I can only take numbers. It cannot be a character, right? So this regular expression is doing that validation, and it's saying in the second tree, I don't see any digits. Sorry, no, I shouldn't say any digits. I don't see it. All three have to be digits, and it is not there, right? That's what it's implying. Now let us change that O to 0 and run through the same set of code, and it passes through, right? This is a valid phone number. Now let's add a country code in front of the phone number. Now, so let us see what happens. Nope. Now it's saying it's not a valid phone number. The reason being it is expecting a plus sign in front of the country code. Okay, let's put a plus sign. Let's see what happens. Nope, it's not a valid phone number. In your case, you could say this is a valid phone number by walking through numbers backwards. You can say, okay, the last four, the next three is exchanged. The last four are numbers, the next three is exchanged. The next three is area code, and then you can say, oh, this is my country code, right? You could walk through like that and validate it, which is a valid one, like this is a valid number. But here I'm not doing that. I'm expecting a space in between. So once I put a space, it says, oh, you're good. It's a valid number. Next, I was trying to validate, or I'm trying to validate, instead of 1, which is US, I'm trying to see India number, right? But I have a space in between 9 and a 1. Let's see what it says. It says, nope, it's not a valid number. Okay. What about space in between 9? There's only one space, which is again valid. And then the phone number is now 11 digits. Is this a valid number? Nope, it's not a valid number. So what do I do next? This we already tried, and we know in between the country code we expect a space. So it's going to throw an exception again. Now I put a space in between the country code and the phone number. It's a valid phone number, right? So you can add more and more cases, right? Like you can have brackets, hyphens, periods, space, all those, right? Like space, dot, hyphens, brackets, all those. You can validate all those. So one of the variation I have is put a hyphen and see if it is valid, right? So it is valid because we are accepting that. And the dot, again, it is a valid one because we are accepting the dot as well. Now with the country code, space in between and the dot for the phone numbers, right? Which is valid. So these are some of the validations you can go through before passing a phone number to the next set, probably before you store into a table, right? The next assertion is the email. This is again, like we are trying to use regular expressions again. Make sure it is a valid email before we store it in the database, right? So let us assume this is what is being passed, all right? Arun@me. And when you have Arun@me without a .org or a .net or a .com, it's going to say, nope, it's not a valid email address. Okay. What about this? arun@me.com. Oh, okay. It looks like a valid email. You're good to go. The next assertion we are going to talk about is the linked assertion, right? Like linked. So typically this is what's happening is we send a club or like a big string separated by comma or some other character, and then we say, okay, anything separated by comma is a row, anything separated by a tilde is a field, or everything separated by comma is a list, right? It could be a matrix or it could be a list, right? Was one dimensional or two dimensional, right? Like row and column or just list of values, right? So Now what we do is we pluck each individual value from that list or matrix and say if the length that you are passing passes the validation that I am after, right? Say the first character has to be 3 characters and you pass me 10. When I insert into the table, it's going to raise an exception. I'm only expecting 3 characters long and you're sending me 10 character long. Maybe you missed a comma, so it's becoming one big word or string. So I'm validating before I raise a SQL exception, right? So let's say this is the supplier ID with my McLean Express assigned, and assume this is coming in as input parameter, and say this is where I'm trying to insert it into the table, right? Like assume it as if I'm inserting into a table. Here I'm going to rather assign it. In reality, it may be an insert statement or an update statement. So what we are going to do is we are saying length of the supplier ID. If only if it is less than or equal to 3, you can go to the next line. Otherwise, you are being raised an exception. This has too many characters, right? So it's more meaningful. User can make sense of what the exception is. So it's saying, oh, supplier code has too many characters. Okay. Maybe you can also say it can be only of 3 character long, something like that, right? It's whatever you want it to be. So let us see what happens here. Say it says supplier code has too many characters. So when it says that, like it didn't go to the assignment or the insert statement or update statement, whatever it followed, and there is no, like, it raised an exception anyway. So this typically you could do dynamically if you're going after tables column. Like you can go against the DBA calls metadata and then say, okay, my table, this column, what is the length? And if that length and the input that is being passed is less than or equal to, we are good. Otherwise, I'm going to raise an exception, right? This is typically because this way we are not hard coding the length. We are going against the column that we are after and we are checking for the length. In the next one, we reduce it from MCL Express to MCL and running through the same set, see what happens. We are good. It assigned and then it also printed. So supplier code is MCL, supplier ID is also MCL. Invalid choice. So invalid choice is like typically say you have a list of choices and the user pass something that is not in the list. You raise an exception, right? So here we are only expecting add, change or delete, and the action code that is being passed is update. So when it is something that we are not expecting, it raises an exception called invalid choice provided, right? Now you change it to change and run through the same thing, it's good. The next one is a numeric assertion, right? Like again, there is another utility provided by framework, which we are going to use here. This is another package, num package, which is provided by framework. And this checks for whether it is a valid numeric or number or not, right? So let us assume weight is being passed as an input parameter. And then we are making sure that the value is numeric before we use that to calculate or insert or whatever, right? And as usual, it says, oh, weight must be numeric because I typoed O instead of 0. So it recognized that it is an alpha character and this said, okay, this is the value you're trying to check is not numeric. Hence, I'm raising the exception that you are providing, which is weight must be numeric. Now I corrected it to 0 and running through the same exception, it says, oh, you're good. Okay, so with this, you can have your own user-defined exception. Say you have a domain table and you have a set of values in the domain table, all you have to do is validate the incoming parameter with the set of domain values and return true or false, right? Like all we are expecting is return a boolean. If it is false, raise the exception. If it is no, if it is true, you can proceed. If it is false, raise an exception. So you can use your own user-defined function and validate whatever you want and assert them. Hope this helps. Now that you have seen assertion in action, let us see some of the code where this has been implemented. Okay, if you see here, the assertion here is looking for a choice, right? Like the in parameter, which is the IO or message, it's a record type, and one of the field is action code, and the action code, the expected values are within this list. If it is anything other than this list, it's going to say invalid action code. And then here, this again we saw, it's looking for, again in the same record type, we have different fields. It's looking for not null, right? This we have seen. And then even this one we have seen for numeric check in the num package, whether the input that is being passed is a valid number, right? Email, again, this is another thing that we saw, whether it is a valid email address, whether this is a valid phone number. So it's doing all the, and then again, too many characters based on the length, and it is going after the DBA calls table, or the view with passing the table name and the column name, all right? So it's doing all these assertions, and after all these assertions, only then it's going to, like, okay, this is a private procedure that is being written to validate everything before any action is being done on that particular input variable, right? So there's merge going on, there is delete going on. All these are within the locus p. All these are see, so it's parsing, parse, okay, I think I got into the wrong one, sorry. Oh, it is in the low. Oh, okay. So after the parse, there is the validate. Sorry, it folded everything. So after the it's parsing, and there is a validate procedure. And after the validate, there is merge, which probably is going to do the insert and update. And then there is a delete procedure, right? So this is the main body, right? In the main body, again, parsing the input parameter, validating, which is asserting, and then only if it passes the validation, then it is doing this action. Otherwise, an exception is raised, and see, it updates the staging table with the error and the error message. Right? So it is getting the error message, and it's going to update the staging procedure or staging table with those values. So typically the things that are we are going to see in another video on parsing, right? So we are going to look into that in another video, but like, it's parsing, it's validating, then the DML actions. If there is an exception in this, it's going to the exception block, it's capturing the error message, and then it's updating the staging table with that, so that if you go against that row, you will know, right? Here you have a staging table where you are recording. In some cases, it's a file that is being passed without a staging table. So you may have to just log into the log table. So there are different scenarios, right? So here there is a proper staging table. So what is happening is there is a file being passed, and that file is being parsed. After the parsing, the file is actually we are using SQL loader to load that file, the data in that file into the staging table, and then once it is in the staging table, it's a clob. I'll show you that we are parsing the data in that table. Once we parse it, we are going through the validation. Once only if it passes the validation, we are saying, oh, okay, now I can do the action that I want to. Hope this makes sense. So since I mentioned that I'll show the staging table, I am going to try to show the staging table. I'm in OMSP database, sorry. I have to switch to e-commerce. So this is the staging table. So typically we have a file and we load that in here as clob. So this is a Sam's DSV order. So this is the order for some customer. It came through and it is being stored here, and the parsing will parse each one. Here it is field separated, so we know from this space to this space is this field, this space to this space is this field. We know exactly. Shoot, I forgot what they call it there. There is something, I forgot, there is a mainframe term for that definition, like they have defined the field lengths and what field everything is, and we use that to parse it. We'll look into the parsing in another video, but you take my word. So we parse and then we do the assertion, and then we do the DML action only if the validation succeeds, assertion succeeds.